Hello everyone, especially to our professor, Dr. Edna Sanchez ma'am, as well as to my classmates to this course, Modern Penology. My name is Benigno G. Balisi Jr., the reporter for the subject or the topic, Austria prisons. Shown in the on the slide will be the sequence of my presentation. So there will be this will be divided into two parts. Part 1 is for our facts and data about the subject of this report, and then on part 2 will be my response to the requirement of the professor for this course. Introduction. Criminology defined crime as a social phenomenon. So when there is a community, there is a crime, as it has been defined by the criminology, that when you say social phenomenon, it is like the rising and the falling of the sun. So we cannot prevent it. And so, when there are criminals in the community, they are considered to be a threat. Looking back to the earliest form of punishment during the Dark Ages, they are applying the principle an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. They only focus on the crime itself. Eventually, on the 18th century, there is a major twist on the view of punishment as they now begin to investigate or to ask why crime occurs. So, and eventually further, the view of punishment of criminals continued to evolve in order to balance the protection of the community as well as the rehabilitation of criminals and the giving of justice to the victim of the criminals. According to Winston Churchill, any society should be measured by the way it treats its prisoners. As a result, all countries strive hard to find ways of improving their correctional system. And it is a reality that Philippines is in urgent need also to improve. Now let us try to look at first, let's have a background about Austria prisons. Austria prisons is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, headed by a Director General. As of 2015, it has a total of 27 establishments or institutions all over the country. Its official capacity or prison capacity is around 8,885. As of January 2, 2020, the total population of prisoners is 8,471. Out of those figures, 6.6% are female prisoners. 1.7 are juveniles or minors. 53.2% are foreign prisoners. And lastly, the occupancy level of the Austria prisons is only 95.7%. Shown in the slides are the correctional institutions in Austria. So as I have mentioned, there are 27 of them. In this slide, included the 3 correctional institutions. Namely, the last 3, it's Correctional Services Academy, the Juvenile Court Assistance Vienna, and the Therapeutic Center Astin, outpost of the prison Linz. With regards to their prisons facilities, they divided it into three major pillars, of which we can see the definition in the next slides. In its structural standards, the structural and the security standards of Austrian prisons is outrightly up to date. The newest institution is the prison Salzburg, that's in 2015. The second is prison in Korniborg, 2012. And the third most recent prison in Lubin is in 2004, which it ranks Europe-wide as the showcase model of modern prisons architecture. Older prisons have been structurally refurbished and partially expanded over the last few decades. Through these comprehensive building measures, these prisons could be raised to modern standards. In addition to the prisoners' accommodations, all prisons have the necessary building infrastructure for useful employment of prisoners, for medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, and socio-pedagogical support. Specific visitor zones facilitate law-compliant visits to prisoner by family members, friends and acquaintances, lawyers and representatives from the support institutions. As a rule, the prison administration premises are located in separate wings or buildings. Prisons have been equipped with modern safety technology. There is a guard room in each prison as a center of safety engineering. All safety-related systems are being centrally coordinated and monitored, such as video surveillance, system devices, door locking systems, electronic security, and etc. With regards to their prison security, they divided it into instrumental, organizational, and social security. Instrumental refers to those equipment of prison guards. Pistols, guns, truncheons, and even include the special SWAT team in order to address special danger situations. Each prison has developed detailed alarm plans for professional intervention in cases of concrete danger situations. A particular agency in the service of organizational security is the Assessment and Evaluation Office for Violent and Sex Offenders. For social security, the degree and quality of relationship between prisoners and prisoner staff, a particularity of the Austrian prison system, consists in prison staff. In addition to their executive tasks, to a significant extent also performing tasks of care and support. Such tasks require a different quality of human-to-human relationship than mere enforcement tasks. With regards to their prison staffing, Austria prisons has a total number of over 3,900 individuals. They considered it as the backbone of their correctional services in Austria. This staff is further broken down into three categories. One is or are prison guards, second is supporting or professional services, and third are the administrative services. Prison guards is about 80% of the entire correctional service personnel. 14% of them are female. Supporting or professional services provide professional care for prisoners from a medical, psychological, social worker, and educational perspective. It includes psychologists, physicians, caregivers, social workers, and teachers. They compose the 11% of correctional personnel. Now, under support or professional services, 61% are female. Lastly, administrative services composes the 8% of personnel, 86% are female. Let us proceed to the situation of prisoners. Correctional locations. Where are prisoners being detained? Prisoners on remand are detained in the 15 so-called regional court prisons. They are individuals whose prison sentences of up to 18 months are executed in the regional court prisons. These prisons are all located at the sites of regional courts in all 9 Austrian provinces. The next is the prison sentences exceeding 18 months are executed in custodial institutions. These are mostly located in the eastern parts of Austria. We have also special custodial institutions for women and juvenile. The prison Squarzau for women, the prison Gerasdorf for juveniles. They have also 2 special institutions for those involuntary forensic placement. For placement of mentally disturbed lawbreakers and for treatment of lawbreakers to be detoxified takes place mainly in Prison Vienna Favoriten. Next is the obligations of prisoners. Correctional Services Act provides that prisoners are subjected to numerous obligations of conduct. The most important obligations of prisoners are following instructions issued by prison staff, observing safety and order, work, participation in one's own social integration, remaining in allocated rooms or allocated premises, contributing towards the cost of detention. Next will be the procedure in cases of misdemeanor. Some misdemeanors are listed as examples. One is escape. Another is unauthorized communication or contact with other persons. Unauthorized keeping of objects. Refusal to work in spite of admonition. Failing to resume detention after suspension of imprisonment or temporary absence. Inappropriate conduct and damaging or severe contamination of prison property. We will now proceed to their rights and privileges. The Correctional Services Act mainly uses the wording, prisoners are to be allowed to, when referring to granting of subjective rights. Shown on the slides are important rights. Example, receiving visitors, writing and receiving letters, making telephone calls, buying additional food and beverages, listening to the radio, and watching TV. Being granted temporary leave of absence and various relaxations of detention, buying books, attending mass, being fitted dental prosthetics, painting, decorating the cell. For female prisoners, caring for and educating their children up to age 3, and lastly, marrying in prisons. Prisoners indicating that they will participate in trying to achieve the purpose of imprisonment may apply for privileges. The following privileges may be granted: using own TV or radio sets or other technical devices, using own sports equipment and clothing, making music, and on instruments. Here's another feature of the Austrian prisons. They emphasize these so-called requests and complaints. Requests and complaints are given to the prisoners. They are allowed or entitled to make it oral or written about concerning themselves. These requests and complaints are usually accommodated during office hours or during petition time. Sometimes also during their admission interviews, they can air the requests and complaints. Their requests may involve various personal needs. In urgent cases, the request may be made to the available prison staff member. This method has proven its worth and is suitable to prevent problems in the administration of custodial sanctions. The request of the prisoners or the complaints must be answered without unnecessary delay. The request must be decided upon without any formal proceedings. And further without issuing any further order. Decisions may be communicated orally. Complaints against administrative penalties or other decisions of the prison management can be also made through requests and complaints. Here's another feature of the Austrian prisons, the so-called contacts to the outside or relaxed regime. Now, Austrian prisons recognize this method as an instrument of social reintegration. Prisoners are allowed correspondence, allowed visits, they are allowed to have telephone calls, they are even allowed to go on escorted outings, or in special cases, an accompanied temporary leave of absence and day release. Also to receive outpatient medical treatment or vocational training. The security and control monitoring is through electronic access control. Now, when it is first time for a prisoner to leave the prison, precise rules about the details of their relaxed regime is laid down. However, if prisoners infringe upon such rules, the relaxed regime that has been granted shall be withdrawn or restricted. The highest level of relaxed regime is constituted by electronically monitored home detention, the detention in one's own home. One requirement also of this one is that the residual prison term does not exceed 12 months. The common feature of all forms of relaxed regime detention is their enormous impact upon achieving the correctional objective of rehabilitation and reintegration of prisoner into the society. The ability of the prisoner to lead an independent life is being developed. Useful social contacts are maintained or re-established, and reintegration in the labor market is supported or enabled. Let's proceed to the taking care of prisoners. Taking care of prisoners is the common task of all staff members in the correctional services. That is why much weight is given to prison staff members who are in contact with the prisoner around the clock in prison wards and in operational units. Therefore, can exert considerable influence upon their development. Here we can see that Austrian prisons acknowledges the necessary for the improvement or for the investment of human resources. That's why when they are thinking about taking care of their prisoners, they invested so much, they capitalize on their prison staff. They have also work and vocational trainings. Like ours, or our correctional system, they also offer work and vocational training. However, one notable difference with their program or their strategies than ours is the implementation. Convicts and prisoners in precautionary measures of placement or forensic placement who are fit to work are obligated to work by law to take over work. So, however, one consideration is it must not prejudice their health. Juvenile prisoners must only work for work related which has educational value. Daily work hours have to be interrupted for a minimum of 2 longer recovery breaks. So they allow or they require their prisoners who are working to rest twice during the working session. The amount of work remuneration is in keeping with the wage of metal workers resulting from collective bargaining. 75% of work remuneration is withheld as contribution to prison costs. Their prisoners or Austrian prisons receive 5 euros per day in detention. Now their income is divided into two. 50% of this amount is freely available to them as their prison allowance, and 50% is saved in the so-called reserve fund for a specific purpose. As I've said, like ours also, their works involve classic handicraft trades. However, in contrast to ours, that our prisoners only work inside our prisons facilities. For Austrian prisons, they can work outside to outside companies like building cleaning, maintaining the prison premises, or even to work in agricultural or forestry operations by way of day release. Of course, conditions are provided. Juvenile prisoners are to be employed and as far as possible to be educated. I have just discussed about those convicts. The second one is for those who are on remand, those awaiting trial. They enjoy the total presumption of innocence before the decision of their case, and they are not required to do any work, or they are not ordained to work obligation. However, adult prisoners on remand who are fit to work may volunteer to work. In their case, what is unique here is that when they take intensive courses or specialist worker training, they are being issued the so-called neutral certificate, which means their certificate does not show that the training was taken in prisons. They are also allowed or provided with the so-called specialized courses. In many prisons in Austria, it is also possible to acquire the European Computer Driving License or the ECDL. Another project that the Austrian prisoners enjoy is the so-called tele-learning for prison inmates. Prisons are equipped with computer workstations for tele-learning. And then they may also take various trainings and further education courses when they are on day release. Another unique feature of the Austrian prisons is their social security situation of their prisoners. As a rule, prisoners have no social security insurance except for unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance for prisoner is taken out as soon as they start their work obligations. When prisoners who have fallen victim to a work accident during detention with a corresponding reduction in earning capacity are entitled to receive a disability annuity under the Correctional Services Act. Regardless of when they perform any work, medical care, and take note, this is financed directly by the federal state and not by the social security agencies. It is provided by medical doctors or by own prison infirmaries. If needed, specialist doctors are consulted or even hospitals are used. Any existing entitlements based on social insurance are dormant during detention and are restored after release. Next slide shows the medical, psychological, and pastoral care support by the social workers. Medical care is insured by the judicial administration, which has to bear the cost thereof. In all prisons, general practitioners hold consulting hours at least once a week. In larger prisons, there are infirmaries for sick prisoners. In smaller prisons, there are solitary cells to accommodate sick prisoners. For prisoners requiring hospital treatment, so-called closed hospital wards have been established in public hospitals. Public hospitals are under obligation to accept prisoners and allow them to be guarded. Prisoners have no free choice of their doctors. In the prison environment, prisoners pay more attention to their own body and to personal sensitivities than when they are in freedom. The functions of prison doctors are not only treatments, but also assessment, like concerning fitness to work, solitary confinement, and special security measures. We will now proceed on how Austrian prisons or correctional facilities or correctional system treat their addicted lawbreakers. The Correctional Services Act offers addicted prisoners the option to undergo voluntary detoxification treatments. The judicial administration endeavors to take over and maintain any treatment initiated before detention during remand detention, and or custodial sanctions. The aim is to provide a possibly unbroken continuous treatment, not including prisoners from public prevention and treatment programs. The measures against illegal consumption of drugs and Austrian prisons are essentially based on the objective of preserve the health of prisoners. So here we can see that the big difference from Austrian prisons compared to ours. For them, addicted lawbreakers, the goal is to preserve the health of the prisoners. For us, we look at lawbreakers, addicted lawbreakers, as plain criminal. An interface function for this purpose is the mandatory admission examination when taken into custody. During such examination, every prisoner receives a so-called take care package containing information sheets about infection prevention, various hygiene articles, and even condoms. In cases of withdrawal problems, such withdrawal symptoms are stabilized through medication prescribed by doctor, or a substitution treatment is initiated or continued. Substitution treatment is treatment by running substitution programs. Programs are either run by prison doctors or medical specialists. The decision to provide substitution treatment to prisoners solely falls within the competence of the medical doctor and is not dependent upon the duration of the prison term. So meaning, their prisoners in this instance, their stay in the prison is not determined on the length or the punishment provided by the offense they have committed, but in terms to their medical condition. This also applies mainly to HIV positive prisoners and to prisoners who have pronounced medical history of opiate consumption. In individual cases, prisoners are even offered substitution programs prior to release. If a high risk of addiction recidivism has to be expected, or such recidivism has actually occurred during their release or outings. Therapy. In addition to therapies for maintaining health or substitution treatment, therapies oriented towards abstinence through individual or group treatment are also offered. Special facilities for such therapies are the prison Vienna Favoriten, as well as special wards in individual prisons. Therapies are administered on a voluntary basis. In addition to such therapies, also outpatient therapeutic measures in external drug addiction units are available. All therapeutic measures in prisons are monitored by regular urine tests. Preparation for release. Great importance in Austrian correctional services is attached to the thorough preparation of release from detention. Through such preparation, prisoners can cope well with their transition from detention to freedom. For example, a continuous involvement of external drug addiction units in the care during detention is foreseen. Furthermore, there is an option for leaving the prison during the day for purpose of work, leisure time, or therapeutic measures. As a rule, within 6 to 12 months before release. This is what I have mentioned earlier as the relaxed regime. Contacts with external social institutions are promoted, which provide housing accommodation and job after release from detention. If needed, in some cases, prisoners may test living and or working experience in transition project or hostels by being granted multi-day leaves of absence during release procedure. The organization Eurostart must receive special mention in this context. It makes great contribution in helping newly released prisoners. Leisure time activities and sports. Well-structured leisure time activities contributed significantly to order and security in prisons. All prisons have prisoners' libraries with about more than 180,000 books, journals, and newspapers available. In addition to the opportunity of listening to the radio or watching TV, there are numerous hobby, music, and theater group support groups. As a privilege, prisoners may be allowed to use their own computers. Excuse me. All prisons have suitable facilities for exercising sports. Excuse me. Physical exercise of prisoners contributes greatly towards release of aggression and thus towards maintaining order and security in prisons. Once a quarter, there are slideshows, readings, theater performances, and concerts as structured from the leisure time activity. They have also the so-called group counseling sessions, which is aimed at releasing tension in prisoners and enabling them to communicate problems and concern in a manner suitable to the group. Let us also examine the economic situation of their prisoners. As a general rule, prisoners are not allowed to have any money nor any other objects in their possession than those left to them during admission or those handed to them at a later stage. Prisoners are prohibited from doing business with other prisoners and the staff members. They may, however, upon approval, receive food and beverage of minor value as gifts. The Correctional Services Act distinguishes three types of property of prisoners. We have the proprietary money, prison allowance, and allocation of reserve funds, as discussed, shown on the slide. Particular feature of involuntary placement. Now, these involuntary forensic placements, they are those mentally disturbed, lawbreakers, and those forensic placement of drug-addicted lawbreakers. They are not actually put in prison for the sole purpose of punishment. Rather, these are precautionary measures. Precautionary measures against the predicted or predicated upon committing a crime. The purpose of such measure is not punishing but reducing the danger posed by the offender in the future. And those in forensic placement have indefinite period of imprisonment. Forensic placement of mentally disturbed lawbreakers. Persons who have committed a crime punishable by a prison term of more than 1 year, but cannot be punished because they committed the crime under the influence of mental state, excluding their criminal responsibility based on a higher degree of mental abnormality. The second category are those drug-addicted lawbreakers. Persons who are addicted to misusing intoxicating or addicting substance and have been convicted for committing a crime in a state of intoxication or in connection with their addiction, or for committing a crime in a state of full intoxication. Such placement shall be carried out under the condition that there is danger due to their personalities and nature of their crimes. The prison being a favoritin, a specialized institution, is available for the treatment of drug-addicted prisoners, and prison wards for the treatment of addicted lawbreakers have been established in 2 other prisons, Innsbruck and Steen. We have also another very unique strategy of the Austrian correctional system. We have this electronically monitored home detention, or the so-called electronic tagging. The most recent form of custodial sanction in Austria, having been introduced in autumn 2010. As a matter of principle, this form of custodial sanction is only being used for persons who are adequately socially integrated. Provided that the residual prison term does not exceed 12 months. Electronic tagging must be applied for and may entirely replace a prison term. Also known as front door version, or shorten such prison term, or the backdoor version. The decision about granting electronic tagging is made by the prison management as enforcement authority. Electronic tagging can replace remand detention, which is decided upon by the competent court. Preconditions upon approval of electronic tagging. The sentence to be served or still to be served shall not exceed 12 months. Another is that it must have a suitable accommodation in Austria. The person must have a suitable job, income to provide means of subsistence, health and accident insurance, the written permission by persons living in the same household, prognosis that after checking housing conditions, the social environment and any possible risk factors, and provided the imposed conditions are being met, this form of serving a sentence will not be used. This will be also withdrawn if the required preconditions no longer exist. Orders or conditions imposed have been violated. Cost contribution imposed have not been paid over a longer period of time, or the persons monitored have declared that they can no longer comply with the conditions set forth. There is strong suspicion that a crime has been committed or that an escape is planned. By June 2016, 305 persons wore electronic tags. Since the introduction of electronic tagging until 31 December 2015, a total of 3,152 prisoners have concluded the procedure of electronically monitored home detention. Only 248 prisoners, the procedure had to be terminated earlier. Release from detention or aftercare organization NeuroStart. An essential element for social reintegration after release from prison is constituted by a well-planned and supervised transition from detention into life in freedom. This is a plan of reintegration. The release is well prepared by suitable relaxed regime detention. It's like in a form of a dry run. Expedient aftercare is planned to follow the measures of involuntary forensic placement. Many detainees have personal and social deficits hampering their reintegration into society. One of the essential pillars of aftercare of released prisoners is constituted by this organization called NeuroStart 7. The organization NeuroStart, which is mainly financed from the budget of the justice system, covers the following task fields: probationary services, assistance to released prisoners, electronically monitored home detention, offense resolution, and community work. NeuroStart is also involved in trial support for victims and in crime prevention. All prisoners are informed by social services that for the preparation of their release, they may avail themselves of the support provided by staff members of NeuroStart. Upon request by prisoners, personal contacts are already established during detention. Job search and search for accommodation of the XPDL, supporting prisoners in resolving issues pertaining to social insurance laws and debt settlement, preparing solution strategies to reduce the risk of personal recidivism constitutes an important part of counseling. NeuroStart contacts are mostly arranged by professional services in prisons to various organizations such as addiction help centers, male counseling facilities, or other institutions of socially supported networks are facilitated. For the purpose of aftercare of physically conspicuous prisoners in forensic placement, the Ministry of Justice has stricken partnership with forensic outpatient stations of some psychiatric hospital. Here, court orders during release on probation of forensic prisoners can be implemented, such as continuation of psychotherapeutic outpatient treatment and monitor of medication treatments. That ends the part 1 of my report. Let me now proceed to the part 2 or on my personal discussion in order to address the academic requirement of the professor of this course. Strategies and methods of prison reformation compared with the Philippines. My first argument or my first discussion revolves around the Austria's economic status. Economic status of a country determines its capability of implementing various programs, one of which is the correctional system. It is a reality Excuse me. It is a reality that Austria's economic status is better than the Philippines. With the above argument, we cannot help but the domino effect cannot be stopped once it started rolling. Resources of a country equals the feeling of security, hence corruption is minimized. Plans and programs are realistic and sustained and become a reality because of the capability of a certain nation or a particular place to support and to sustain their program. Therefore, reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration of a person in conflict with law is very doable for their country. No matter how we study or try to imitate their strategies and plans, we can never level their capability of successfully managing our correctional systems because in the first place, we lack economic capability. Almost all of their programs or strategies also exist in ours or in our country, though in different contexts and means or brands. But the essence or the goal of reforming, rehabilitating, and successfully reintegrating prisoners to the community are the same. Our correctional facilities compared to them have an enormous difference. Philippine prisons can be categorized as one among of the many worst prisons in the world. On the other hand, Austria is in the total opposite. The Philippines, while being a thickly populated country, has a limited number of correctional facilities. In contrast, Austria has a total of 27 world-class prison facilities scattered all over the country, considering their minimal total population and the number of prisoners. The Philippines have exceeded exponentially to the total capacity of our facilities. If theirs is about 96% occupancy level, ours is 464%. Our lack of economic capability, the structural standards of our facilities are not a priority as a result. Much more with the security of our prisons. As a result, we utilize our prisoners to do some reformatory or some prison tasks which are not appropriate. At the very least, our correctional institution is in constant agony for their lack of personnel to man the prisons. Again, most of our prisoners are required to do work which is not supposedly done. For example, helping manage the prisons. Current issue that could morph into an unimaginable menace in our prison systems. Corruption, abuses, drugs, and so on. Observance of appropriate ratio on prisoner and staff. Austria's prisoner to staff ratio is about 2:1. That is 1 prison staff is to 2 prisoners. Out of their less than 9,000 prisoners scattered in 27 facilities, they have about 4,000 personnel to man them. How did they reform their inmates? For me, there is not so much uniqueness in the way Austria reformed their inmates. Some of their strategies can be seen also in our country. Their financial capability to implement and sustain the rehabilitation program, I strongly believe, is the key. The irony of my assessment is that actually Austria do not focus so much on what will be the result of their inmates after going through the correctional system. They just put in place what they strongly believe is the means to reform inmates based on the principles they believe, like all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The other says all persons deprived of their liberty shall be treated with humanity and with respect for the inherent dignity of the human person. After they just put in place everything, it is inevitable that the ideal result will normally come out. Successfully rehabilitated, successfully reformed, and successfully reintegrated prisoner to the community is the result. In contrast, in the Philippines, we are requiring so much in an institution where we knew that we have not given enough means, not because we do not want, but because we do not have the actual capacity to provide it. Our workers of the government resorted to innovation and initiatives that oftentimes prejudice the welfare of the client or the prisoners. We cannot deny this, that some or most of our prison staffs also are suffering also from, uh, let's say, financial difficulties. Here is another notable difference we can see from this. Again, we cannot deny this, that the conditions of our prisons are like a nightmare that people do not even think of going through it. It becomes our approach of deterring people from getting in trouble with the law. We instill fear in our populace, and as a result, people's view of prison is something to survive and not a place to reflect, reform, and be rehabilitated. Prisons are a place where one needs to become someone to coexist, live, be hardened emotionally and physically for some time. To say it plainly, Austria engages the well-being of an individual prisoner by providing them what is just and necessary for their reformation and integration to the mainstream of the society. For our country, it is not that we do not want. Honestly, we have to admit it. We are not capable. Their rehabilitation programs. Austria's programs focus mainly on the appropriate intervention and treatment of their PDL. It all begins with a careful classification of persons to be detained. Prisoners on remand status are not obligated to work. They enjoy a total presumption of innocence because of their classification. Unlike ours, prisoners' classification does not make any sense. They also emphasize the obligation of their prisoners. These obligations are given value by their inmates, given the implication that it will have in their rehabilitation program. Alongside also are the too good to be a reality for our prisons, rights and privileges of their prisoners. Buying additional food and beverages, listening to the radio and watching TV, temporary leave of absence, and various relaxation of detention, leisure time, decorating the cells, so on and so forth, to mention a few. Their programs are not totally unique for the rest of the correctional institutions all over the world. What is unique is their implementation to its fullest sense is guaranteed. For the rest, these are just good for the books or shelves rehabilitation programs. Prisoners are allowed to make oral or written complaints and requests. Feedback mechanism is strictly in place. The situation and complaints of prisoners are not belittled. Contacts to the outside world are also emphasized, bound by the rules and regulations of the correctional institution. They understood it well. The goal of reintegration of the prisoner to the outside world after serving his sentence or other lawful reasons. For our prisons facilities, the famous signal jammer was installed here and there to restrict connection to the network for any form of communication to the outside world. Logically, our prisoners will be totally disconnected to the community, where we projected to reintegrate them at the end of their supposed rehabilitation program. One highlight we see here with Austria is the grant of suspension of imprisonment for few days. Here, a prisoner or the prisoner recognizes the sincerity of the government to rehabilitate them and thus began to internalize the need to be at their best in cooperation with the government programs. Let's try to look at Justice Center Luban. Prison Luban is a regional court prison accommodating only 205 prisoners. Male, female, and juvenile remand prisoners and convicted prisoners serving a final prison term up to 18 months are detained there. The prison became operational in February 2005 and is still considered excuse me, still considered one of the most modern prisons in Europe, with bright rooms for prisoners and staff members. Excuse me. And a unique architectural concept being emphasized in new construction. Special attention was placed on inserting window grates on special places where they are absolutely necessary from a point of view of security. Otherwise, much glass was used for premise to be especially pleasant and bright. In spite of all interior latitude and liberality, the prison is efficiently secure on the outside, so that it is possible to a very ample extent for prisoners to freely move about within the prison. Accordingly, the prison Leuven, in addition to various courses and leisure time groups, also has employment opportunities in altogether 5 operational units like kitchen, laundry services, maintenance workshop, outsourcing unit, and general workshop. 2 sports halls or 2 outdoor fields and 2 gyms are available for